Yeah, good morning, good evening, everybody. Okay, yeah, just to go and have a quick recap, right? So last session we have learned pretty much good about functions. So how do we import functional modules and basically, right? So what is the need of function and how do we start coding, right? So if we got a work, so basically we start with the minute steps and then we wrap up into a block of statements. Maybe you just put it in a functional definition and you could just save all functional definitions in one file, make it like functional library, and then you have a driver script. And what is the importance of driver script and why do we need it? And how we learned about all that stuff is we tried to handle a file, like file handling concepts, right? So those parts we have learned, like someone pinged a question, right? So I guess I responded to it on the previous class. Yeah, like what is the advantage of with open, right? And open. So that I have given the answer. So this is like more systematic way, right? So if you're just reading the file with open, as I've highlighted, you have to deliberately close the file. And also, if the execution terminates for some reason, the lock on the file might still be on hold because it will still be reading that file with an object. And you have to close all the sessions by task manager or Linux. I've given the example, right? A Linux command is ps space hyphen ef. You can just look for the process that is running by the name Python. You just kill it. So to avoid all that and to have a clean exit and entry, we use with open. That is why it is highly recommended. That's the contrast in between these two. This is like systematic way. That is a more generic, more plain way or a simplest way. And there's and calling functions we have seen, return types we have seen, right? So we gave a flag and send it as a return. So let's, before we dive into, there are a few concepts which I wanted to cover: pycache, uh, and then the init.py. Let's go back to our module. Let me just, okay, and show. So this is where we have our code, right, under Python training. So here, what are the mod folders that we have? Directories, right? Terminology is directories. So we have subfolder and all, something like that, but we don't have anything else, right? So let me try to run. So we have created one, right? So what is the one is the driver script, as I was just giving in the recap. Let's see what we have in the driver script. So we just imported a module and a function within a module. What is that module? It's file functions. Let's see what is in the file functions. So file functions has, let's remove this for now. We don't want it, but okay. File functions, consider it as a package library, user defined library. Here we just, so we have a function which takes the file name as one of the argument, and then it does it like if it exists, it tries to remove it. Else what it does, it just not found. These are like print messages, right? And then we're trying to return a flag. So what is the value that we define? Flag as false, boolean false. If the file got deleted successfully, we are making it as true. Otherwise we just left at the default value, which is false, and we'll returning it. Depending on the return value, which is the flag, we are just again proceeding with the flow. These are like simple examples, right? So don't consider, as always, right? So our objective is to cover all the concepts basically from the bottom or the fundamental. It's not just fundamentals, right? You need to understand the need of it. So one could just say, okay, if else condition statements. Well, how do you write if else condition statement? Okay, if happens and else happens. So why do you actually need it? So this is very basic again, if else. So if you look for anything, right? So I have explained in detail. So why do we need a function, and why do you need a return type, and why not hard code it? What were the disadvantages? So this is like a This is like a code that is free from any hard coded values. That's where we excel and as excel as a programmer. And also some other things that we have to follow once we start our roles in projects, right? So once we, so it's always like we move within, even within a company we move across multiple projects, right? There is always called handover. Like say if I'm moving to a different project, I've written all utilities, developed utilities, I need to give a handover. Like say that handover cannot be cannot be going on for a long days, right? It will just be a couple of days handover, that's it. But rest all what lies within it is my code has to be self-explanatory for anyone who has some expertise within the programming that I've written. So, and also that's one reason why we also have to make our code clean and free, and also it has to be understandable. So if something like this is here, I can just put a function definition after it within the doc string, or else I can say this is a simple function. This is I actually need to put in the doc string. Doc string, what is a doc string? We start and end with triple quotes, right? So single quotes, single quote or single double quote pair is a string. And if you're using three quotes is a doc string. So we can put it in a doc string or a simple comment. This is a simple function which takes one argument. And what is that argument? File. One argument, complete file path. Okay, so if you're reading to it, though it is like not on the complete sense, but at least you'll understand, okay, it takes one argument. What is that argument? And what is that argument? It's a complete file path. So this is like info. It's okay. If someone has any question? Okay. Something like that. And so this is what we have written. So let me just, before I proceed with the other concept, right? So here what I wanted to cover is this. What is the importance of pycache and init.py? So we'll cover pycache now, and we'll later we jump onto the init.py. I'll give a background on what why it was needed and why it has become optional now. So let me pull up the terminal. Okay. And here we have it. Let me just run. What is my script? Driver.py. So let's have a, okay, here I don't have anything, right? Let me just run this. So it ran, right? File not found. Why the file not found? As we, if you remember it rightly, because we are giving file not found if the file name doesn't exist. What is the file name we are passing in the driver file? Sample copy.csv. So that doesn't exist here, right? Sample.cs, sample space copy.csv doesn't exist. I just have sample CSV. But as I've executed, if you see now, there is a new folder that has been created by the process underscore pycache underscore underscore. So let's go and see what exactly is in it. So it has one file. So what it's saying, file functions dot c python 3.311. So this 311, let's come from back, right? 311 is nothing but my Python version that I have installed on my MacBook. And POS is the file extension. So what Python actually does is when I'm running this driver, so what is this driver doing? It is importing a module, right? File function module. So while it imports it, so what we see, if I give blah, 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 we should end up with an error, right? Because it doesn't exist. So if it exists, what it does, it compiles that module and it saves that module in a binary system, in a binary format, or basically not binary, it's a bytecode format. Sorry, it's a bytecode format. Python bytecode format is .pyc. So as I run this driver, it compiles this module, which is file functions, and it creates its own file for a faster execution. It's not like this has to be there in not be it's not necessarily the case, but while it runs it, it just runs. So I am not making any changes to file functions, right? So if I'm running this now any number of times, so what it does, it it looks for the timestamp most of the times. So this file dot, if you see this file functions is not edited. Where is this? Here it is. So this file functions is not edited. So it will just use the compiled version. Instead of compiling this again, it will just go into the pycache and look for the compiled versions and executes the driver program so that it can save some time. It's fast execution. So that is the major advantage of pycache. We are not creating it. It is the system that creates this directory. And what files it is creating, again the modules that you are importing. See, it's not creating the file that you run, which is the driver.py. Within the driver.py, we are importing this module. So that is the compiled version that is being saved in bytecode format. If somebody asks you, this is like, yeah, fewer, this pycache and init are mandate interview questions, right? Because we have to understand, we cannot just say, okay, yeah, I saw the pycache it creates and what it creates. We have to be giving in a clarifying explanation, so such that we know in and out of the program execution or in and out of the system what we are doing, we should know, right? So few interviews will be touching on the top layer, like say on the basics and all, but few, even if you look for FAQs in Python, if you go for top 50, there could be most of these questions which we are covering right now. But you should always spend some time in going in depth. So what is pycache? Somebody would say, as a one liner answer, somebody would give, right? Okay, yeah, pycache is the cached files that are created while you execute a program. We need to go in depth. So what are the cached files? What is the need of it? What happens if I delete it? So let's say I delete it. So how do you clear the cache? We just, if somebody says, okay, we need to clear the cache of the files, right? Python files, you just go and you just delete it. That's fine. It's not gonna complain. So if I run it again, it will create the pycache again. Whenever it executes again, it does create it. So no issues there. This is only for faster performance. That's it. It need not do it. Just like the browser cache, right? If you in any browser that you have used, there will be some cache that builds whenever you access any web page, right? So mostly the images and everything else would be in the browser cache. So sometimes that's why people ask you, if you're not able to, like say, same example, right? HDFC Bank, if you're using some HDFC Bank and like say you newly taken a HDFC credit card, right? So you've been using, because you've been a customer with HDFC Bank, for say example, right? So you've newly taken credit card. So what is expected is once you log in, the credit card tab should populate your credit card number, your statement, your recent transactions, bill transactions, whatever you earn on it, you on the credit card, like reward points, everything. But as you are a new customer, it's like newly added to your profile, right? So I've been using, so you've been using on the Chrome or Safari or anywhere, right? Whatever your system is in mobile browser. So once you use it, sometimes what happens is, though the system in the background they add the credit card to your link, right? Your customer ID or bank account number, sometimes it doesn't get pulled onto the browser, because most of the times or some of the times what it does is it tries to load whatever it's finding in the cache, the generic data, whatever it is there in the cache, it doesn't store like your account number, your balance and all, but few of the whatever it can be loaded quickly, like the images and some versions, some data within that application, it stores in the cache. So that's why you would hear from people saying, clear your cache. Did you clear your cache? Because if there's a new update usually sent to a program or a web browser or a portal or anything, so you have to clear your cache. That is one example. So I've cleared my cache, right? So sometimes this might get messes up because I'm running it like 20, 30 times in a day, right? Sometimes. So it's do get messed up sometimes. So even if I'm updating this file for underscore functions, it might not compile it again. It might just start using the old one. So in order to avoid such issues, it clear the cache. That is the importance and how it gets created. Say there is also another way. Like say somebody said, like, I don't want cache to be created. Because even cache it can run, right? It is just creating a copy, compiled copy, and it is just going with it. So let's say, let me delete it. There is one option. If I'm running this Python driver again, I don't want cache to be created. So how do we do it? So while executing it, what is usually we're giving Python space the script name, right? Let's do hyphen b and script name. So what it directs is it directs the Python to not to create any cache folder. If you see here, nothing. It did execute it. There was no file. Even if I say, like, say, let me create the file also. So it deleted the file, right? It successfully executed most of the lines of code. See, there is no file. So if you don't want the pycache to be created for some reason, you could always execute the command line window in -b or dash b. Dash b is what we call, or hyphen b or -b, anything is fine. So dash b. So this is the way you can suppress the pycache creation. These are important. So while you start working on it, right? So because yesterday also we would have seen it when I was the last session, right? It should have been created. Only thing is we just didn't pay attention to it. So wherever the driver is there, it tries to create in that directory. If my driver is somewhere in the subfolder, if I'm trying to run it, it would create it. Try it this way, right? After this class, you put your driver or file functions in this directory and see what is happening, a subdirectory, and also see, leave the file functions here, pull the driver onto the subfolder and run it. See if it runs or it's trying to say any error. Try to fix it and work on that and come back with any questions if you have. You could just ping up before the class or after this class anytime, right? We'll
So
try to cover that in the next session.
yeah, driver.py file is the standard file, or did you write anything in there?
Driver.py is I have it open, right? So we are just importing it and we are calling it. That's
Oh,
it.
okay. You can name it anything, right? That's
You
fine.
can name it anything.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah, technically we call it driver. That's why I named it driver. Yeah,
Okay,
that's
right.
it. Yeah, it's up to your preference.
Okay. Thank you.
So that is one part. So the next part, init.py, right? So when I started, it was around 2.7 version of Python when I was using it in one of my projects, right? So then what was happening is, so when I was trying to import, right? So again, driver.py, like say, this is my driver script or the base script. So what I was trying to do here is I'm trying to import a module which is in the same directory. So earlier, we cannot go back and see it. But earlier, what was the expectation was if I'm trying to run this, it would throw me an error because this directory Python trainings is not considered as a Python package. So as to make it understand a Python package, so what we used to do is, like say, just we used to create an empty file like this. So I don't need to have anything. We had to just create an empty file with this name init underscore underscore init underscore underscore dot py to make to consider it as a Python package. So then only, so this import whatever I was trying to do used to work. Otherwise, it would throw the error like cannot find the file functions dot pack module whatever I was trying to import it. So that was until 3.3 version. So right now what I have on my machine is what 3.9, right? And the latest was around 3.11, right? Yeah. So anything above 3.3, this has become optional. That is the importance of it. If you see FAQs, you would find it. So what is the importance of init.py? It importance is if we create an empty file by this name, this will be considered as a Python package basically. And then it tries to import everything. Anything that you have to import it, you would import it. But right now, before it was created also, it worked fine for us, because with the latest versions it has become an optional. But to maintain the standard, right, like coding standards, most of the programmers always create init.py, the blank file. That's it. That's a importance and why it has become optional. And when we go into the classes, so will there will be init method, so we'll understand. So don't get confused with the method here and this init.py file. These are different. When the next classes, when we cover classes and methods, right, class methods and objects, we'll learn more. Just make a note. So this one is important, why it is become, why we don't create it and how it is working. Back then it wasn't working. I always have to create it. That is one of our interview questions, or else whenever we started working in Python, right, that's a basic error we used to get. Because mostly we tend to create everything, right? So when we are starting with any program, mostly we tend to create everything in one file and just run it, put everything under one file and run it, right? That's how we do it. So later, once you create libraries and then you create different modules, so then you have to import it, then you'll used to get this error. Yeah, otherwise you would just import whatever was already there in the project. So that is other thing. Yeah, these two I wanted to cover at first, and next let's see command line arguments. Okay, so command line arguments, there are again two modules, default modules within Python. So one is called sys, just like the open with open we have, right? So this is like similarly, this is a very basic module. It is like less flexible, as in will cover all the topics. Like say, by the definition, it's like import sys. So what is a command line argument, right? So right now, what we are trying to run, let's say, ignore. Okay, so I'm trying to run driver.py. So am I passing any command line arguments here? No. How do we know we are passing any command line? There is nothing followed by driver.py, right? So if I'm passing anything after driver.py, it would become a command line arguments. But right now, so partly our code is hard coded. Oh, I wanted to cover optional also, but let's see. We had to cover optional default arguments. Okay, just give me 10 more minutes or maybe more than that. So this is another important topic we have. Okay, let's okay, let's go back to the other topic, understanding optional default arguments. So that is important. Okay. So we'll make use of the code that we already have, right? So we already have file functions, just to save time instead of coding everything again altogether. Okay. So here, as I was saying, or as we know, it just accepts one argument. Basically, it has just only one argument in the function definition. So this error we have seen, right? If I was giving more values in the driver.py while calling this function, it throws too many arguments given. Okay, because it accepts only one argument. So what if I want to do something like, say, I wanted to have an argument, but I want to make it optional for it. So what is our requirement here? We are like say requirements would be what? Requirement or function definitions, right? Requirements would be delete a file provided by the user. Okay. So this is it. So next the requirement would be an advanced requirement, like take a backup if user specifies, then delete a file. Okay, but keep backup as optional. So this will be a real-time requirement. It would be like editing a file, right? Not just deleting a file is easy for us. Even if you're editing a file, it's always so, just like you're upgrading your OS, you always take backup. You're moving to a new, upgrading your handheld mobile device, you'll always take backup. Say something like that, right? That's what we usually do. We always take backup if you are touching something. So your new requirement is, so this requirement we have achieved, like say v1.1, right? Requirement 1.1. So now it is the requirement 1.2. Take a backup if user specifies, like say specifies, then delete a file, else keep back also, while keeping backup as optional, meaning this user might say like, okay, take a backup, or the user might not say take a backup. So how do we do it? So this is a good example of optional argument. So I need to make use of the same function that I already have written for my earlier requirement. Now I have to make this, or upgrade it to an, and I accept another argument which is optional. So optional arguments, how do we do it? So this is my default, right? Or the first argument, which is always we have to give it. So all the optional argument should come at the end of the arguments. Like in the functional definition, I cannot give my functional optional argument first, right? It makes sense. It's like give all the default, all the required arguments, and then give the optional argument. So here, let's say, what is my optional argument? I'll see backup. We give it as false, or you can give any value also. So right now we are going with binary. I'm making it false or true. Like say if it's false, only change I did is what? I just gave an optional argument. Let's see. What is my driver? My driver is still unedited. This is my driver, right? My driver is still unedited. I didn't do anything here. Let me try to run if it gives any error. No, it didn't give me any error. Or else if you want to run it with a file, also we can do it just to be sure. Okay, let's run it again. It deleted the file. It didn't throw me an error because how we have made it is, this is optional. If user doesn't specify the second or functional argument also, it works fine. This what conveys Python, right? It's optional. So while you're calling sample function, you need not specify backup. So now, but we have achieved part of the requirement, right? We have made it optional. So now what if user says, boss, take the backup of the file and then delete it? So how do I edit my code? Right? So now let's think, let's take step back. Okay. So here comes the place where you have to think manually. Okay, so how do you usually, like say I'm doing it manually, right? You might know it, but I just want to give it a better clarity, like how, what would be approach, right? If you're going into the programming, you can think, you need not manually do it. Okay, this is my file. Actually, that is not my file. This is my file in our example, right? So this is my file. If I want to take a backup, how would you usually take a backup? Just copy, do it. So this copy to doesn't make any sense, right? You do BSE UK up, or else you could say backup as a short form. So this makes sense. And also this tells me, okay, this is my backup of the sample copy, and I can delete this. That's how manually we do it, right? Let's say because my requirement didn't tell me. So what did a requirement said? It just like take a backup. They didn't say keep multiple backups and all. They just said take a backup. So backup is always a latest backup. So let's come to it. So this, like say I'm thinking this way. They just asked me to take a backup. They didn't say the format. I wanted to make, so if you make it this way, simplest way is just underscore backup. So this is gonna mess up the file extension, right? This makes the file unusable. So we don't want to try it, right? Someone is trying to read it, it makes it unusable in other systems. So let's move it to trash. So this is my file. So let's come back to our program. Okay, so this is, and now to make it more understandable, backup is an optional argument. Okay, now we know. Okay, backup is something optional. If anyone is reading it, they know it obviously by if they understand Python, they know it's like optional. So now what I need to do, if it's provided, I have to take a backup. I don't want to again what hard code my code, right? So we'll go step by step. Okay, now if backup is there, so Python way, right? So there is Pythonic way. So it's always like like going in a happy flow. Like say if not backup. So let's go with this. So if not backup meaning if it's not true meaning if it's false meaning it's not provided. So that's a negative way, right? Negation. So this is one way we can deal with it. So if it's not backup, let's see if I run it, what happens. See what it's saying, it is still executing it because I didn't still edited my driver.py. I'm not passing the second argument here. If you see, it got executed. Optional argument has not been passed. Okay, right. If backup, let's see this. So if backup meaning if it's true, right? But we're not passing the value. See, it didn't get executed. It immediately went to the alert, file not found, and proceed to the next flow. Here, right? It went to here because there was no file, which by the name sample space copy, and also backup hasn't been provided. So let's go back to it. You're clear, right? So negation. If not backup, this is it. And then what? If it's if they ask me to take a backup, I need to actually take a backup of a file. So by manually when I was trying what I was doing, what we were doing, we are just right clicking, copying the file and then renaming the file. So it's because I know the file name. While we are running this, it's always like it's arbitrary, right? Not always that my driver script will have the sample space copy. What if the new file has been updated in the sample in the driver script? My program still has to work, right? I cannot always change my program. And moreover, I cannot hard code in my function definition. So what I can do? So this guy file name has my path or complete path to the file, right? Because I'm running locally in the same directory, I'm not giving the path. I think I asked you to try to we have seen, right? We try to place the file in the subfolder and try to read it. So yeah, similarly you could put it in different directory also. That's fine. So now my challenge is to read this guy. What is the file name? I need to read it. And dynamically, I need to put what? Underscore backup. And where should I put it? Before the file extension, right? So most of my requirement is always like dot, right? So all file extensions, most of the file extensions is always like dot operator, unless they're not defining anything. But most of the files, flat files or any files will always have an extension to it, right? Dot. If it's like Linux, it need not necessarily have like any touch space test, right? If it going to just derailing to Linux again. So in Linux, if you execute this command, it will create a file. It has no extension, but you could just read the file. You could just cat is to read or more test or less test. These are all commands where you can read a file, any file. So Linux doesn't need to be explicitly stored .txt or anything. It will just be a file in Linux. Coming back here, but we're working on Windows right now. This is all like for you to gain some knowledge on different operating systems, right? As I said, mostly click to cloud and everything is mostly Linux only. So and now what is that I need to do? Okay, file name I have it. So I need to do a file name. So how do I read it? Let's see. What is my file name here? Sample. So this I wanted to explain in detail so that you would get the idea and why we learn all the basics, right? What is my extension? CSV. So how should my file should be? I don't want to edit it, right? I just want to keep everything as is backup.csv. This is my copy. Before I delete this file, this should be my copy, right? So how do I do it? So think through once. Let me ignore the spelling. So what I have here, dot. So what is the file name here? It's a string. How do I know it's a string? I'm passing it as string, right? This is a string. So how can I separate this out? Because before dot, irrespective whether it is CSV or TXT, I need to append some text, or basically append some text to the file name that ends before dot. What is the text that I need to append or prefix before dot? It's that underscore bkup backup. So how do I do it? We have learned in strings, right? What is the functions that we have learned, methods that we have learned in strings? Split. What does split does? If you take a string and give dot split, if you give any delimiter, it will split the string by the delimiter number of times, right? Number of times the delimiter exists, it splits the string. So what does it do? It returns a list, right? That's how it does. We have seen it in earlier classes. So this is where our fundamentals will help us. And instead of that, right? So ideally, if we haven't learned about strings, basically everybody might know what string is meaningful. But the split, how does the split works? What is the return type of a split? And how do you, that's a list. So how do you work on list, slicing, everything comes in play here. So instead of going and googling, okay, how do I add a backup to the existing file dot or trip and all, there might be some very simple techniques also, but this is what we have learned, right? Let's go back to it. So how do I do it is split at dot. And what do I do? I take the first part, right? So I have only one dot here, so this is my first part and this is my second part. So what I need to do, I need to first split a dot and then take the first part, and I need to add what? This guy, right? Okay. And what I need to add? I need to add the extension also, right? Where is the extension saved? CSV. So if I'm splitting it, this will be my second part. This is my first part plus backup plus second part, let's say SP. But my second part doesn't have dot in it. Obviously, it will not have dot. You could try it because we're splitting it. So it doesn't carry dot anywhere. So you just give dot here. So this will be my duplicate file name. So this is how your simplest way, your way of breaking up the code and your solution to the question, right? Or the problem statement. So this is easy. So now what I need to do, let's code it up. So we have a rough statement, right? How I achieve it. So now I need to do like say what? Temp list, temp list. So what will be my temp list? File name. I need to split this string. Where do I split it? What is my delimiter? Dot. So, so now this is my list, right? And this list have two values. First value will be this part, sample underscore copy. Next value will be CSV. So now I need to derive a copy, right? So how do we make a copy? We need to define the copy name, right? Within the command, it doesn't do it. So like say, and then let's create a file name. What will be the file name? Duplicate file name. What will be the duplicate file name? This is my temp list, right? Same way. 0, which will be the first part, right? That will be the first index, right? Plus, this is a string, so I could use plus operator easily. Plus what did I write here? Backup. Plus, what is my second part here? 0 plus 1, right? First index. So this will be the length of the index will be 2, 0 and 1. This is it. So now I have the duplicate file name. So let us just print it. Let's not make a copy yet, but let's just print it. So here I have not given any logic, right? Irrespective of the file name exists or not, it always tries to run this because my os.paths.exist is next to it. So this line of code will no matter what execute as long as the optional argument is provided by the user. So now I have something here. Let's see. Okay, it ran without any issue. So far this logic is all good, but my driver script is unedited yet. We are not passing any optional argument here. So it could be anything. So here it's just, so what am I considering here? I'm not passing an actual value here, right? It's just boolean, true or false. If user wants backup, do this. If user doesn't want backup, ignore it. So meaning I can give anything here. I can always give back. It has to be meaningful string, right? I can just give backup. This could be anything. So if backup is provided, let's see what happens. Okay, so now there is some other new line, right? Earlier it was this because the file wasn't there. And optional argument has not been passed is skipped because user did pass the optional argument and now we are printing it. So does this look good? Yes, that is my requirement. I'm trying to prefix underscore backup before dot so that this still makes an readable backup copy of the file, not messing up the extension. So now we are good. So now I have to make a copy of the file, right? I just have the file name here, nothing else. Just consider it as a text. So now to make a copy easily, there is package called shuttle. Just like OS, we have something called shuttle. What this package does is it helps us in making a copy of the file. So we've imported shuttle, just dot copy, give the source name comma destination name. So what is my source name here? File name, right? That is the file that user wants to delete. That's the user passed argument as well. So now what is my destination? Duplicate file name. So these are like standard commands, just like we have print, right? So something like shuttle.copy, what it does is it takes a source file and it makes it copies into a destination file. What is my destination file here? It's a derived value, right? So this part should work fine. Let's just go with our code, right? If you have missed anything. Okay, flag is false. This is something a return value. If it's not backup, we have tested it. If it's a backup, we are making a duplicate of the file. We have derived the name. Rest all is old code only. Okay, it exists, it deletes it. Else it says file not found. But one problem is this part, right? If it doesn't exist also it runs. So this might break because file name might not be present. Let's see. It should fail. Right. Because sample.copy doesn't exist. Does it exist? No, I haven't created it yet, right? We're still going in the negative scenario. So if you see what happened within the code, okay, this is where it is calling, and then where the error occurred is file name comma duplicate file name. Why is the error? Because this file name doesn't exist. The file is not physically present on the directory. So how do I put it? So we have to put this back where? Within the if block, right? Because I want that to run only when the file exists. Otherwise, I don't want it to run. Let's fix it. This is going to mess up the formatting. I think we are good, right? So this is the part that when you're written. So if it exists, before it deletes it, it takes a backup. Let's see if it runs fine. Okay, it ran fine, no issues. Though the file doesn't exist, we fixed all the errors and this logic should work fine. And let us make the file. So instead, always, let's make it sample one, right? Just to see why to fix to the same file name all the time. Sample one. Okay, so we have sample one here. Do we have any other copy? No. Any other backup? No, nothing. Let's run this. Okay, it is just printing whatever we gave and then it deleted sample1.csv by the output and then it went to the next flow. It's all in the driver script. So now if you see, it created a copy of the CSV. 880 bytes, right? If you see here, the original CSV, it is 880 bytes, and it made a copy of this and it deleted sample one from here. So we have achieved this requirement. My requirement or requirement 1.2 is successfully achieved, and we have mostly tested everything else. So one way, right? Always try to break your own code. That's what helps us, because if you are the one testing your code or like unit testing your code or anything, right? Assembly testing or system testing your code, you always try to make it a success. But if you give the code or application to the testing team, what is their objective? The quality assurance team or quality engineers, their objective is to break the code or break the functionality. That's when their test cases would be like, there will be like multiple test cases that where they write, right? But majority of that would be always a happy path. What is a happy path? Where the system always ends or system always gives a positive output. But their subset of test cases will also have a negative testing. Like what if the file doesn't exist? What if the .csv is changed to .txt? So something like that. They'll always try to break the system. So before that, before you deploy your code into higher lanes or next level next range of environments or next block, so you always better you always test your code. So that's what we are trying to do. Earlier this block of statements were outside of this, right? So it always tries to create the file and it is going to throw an error because that file doesn't exist. So this is one importance of optional, and we have learned few other topics along with optional also. How do you make a copy of the file? You just import shuttle. And also breakup, right? So what we have seen is how do we achieve it? So this is your approach. So this could be like a minor example or a requirement, right? So as it advances, it will be complex requirements, but the approach should always be the same. That's what I meant to say. Approach doesn't change, right? Though if you're building a small utility or bigger utility or a chat bot or anywhere it goes, your approach should always be the same. Just the complexity increases. That's what it is. It happens in programming. So I'll just give a pause here, just go over it so that you'll understand what we did. Okay. So we can keep this aside. Okay, for now we have this, right? Let's not touch this again. We'll go with this guy. So we will make it more advanced. Let's see what we can do it. That's with this optional and default arguments, right? Okay, next coming back the one which is just started, it's a command line argument. So as I mentioned earlier, so mostly your Python script should be one advantage of Python, right? You could execute it command lines. So instead of just double clicking a file or running a file, you could always, this is the simplest way because any downstream or upstream, they can always call your file, your program. They can always execute a program easily just by executing this command line. So again, so what are the two modules that we have? One is a sys module. So sys module, what it does is it's a very simple module where you could just pass some arguments and it does your you can once you pass the arguments, what is your next plan of action? Just like if you go back to the function, I'm not going to open it, but just imagine, right? The function that we have written, the first one is the file name, the second one is the optional argument. So what we did there, you just defined in the function definition and you read it, right? You have to read it and then you have to process it. That's how you can complete that function and also make use of the arguments that user is passing to that function, right? Similarly, this sys module, what it does is, so whatever you're passing it here, right? So here this is considered as one of the argument. Anything after Python will be considered as arguments with the space operator, like say. So this one, sys considers it as driver.py as the first argument. Let's see if it's true or not. And then it is very simple, and most of it considered as a string only. Everything that passes off as an argument when you are using sys module, everything is considered as a string. And also it fails sometimes, and also it doesn't fail most of the time. We'll see that, we'll cover it. And the advanced is argparse. So any systematic programming and all, people don't use sys. At a very basic level, people use sys. But the next one is the argparse. It seems little lengthy, argparse, right? Once we have to, like say, what I'm trying to do is, if you're trying to read the command line arguments, your code looks lengthy, but it's a systematic way of one has to write it. And also it's like standard line of code, right? So it's always like, if you're trying to do a jdbc or dbc connection, if you've heard, so those lines of code doesn't change. If you're trying to just like, if you have to read through the command line arguments, that line of code doesn't change at all. So importing the argparse or importing the sys, just like the import statement, as simple as how do you import? You just import OS. You're importing OS. That doesn't change, right? Those are very basic things. So are standard things. But argparse needs few lines of code, but it's always like copy paste the code. So if you're trying to do one utility and then you have to work it on the other utility where you have to read the command line arguments, you just copy paste the code. That's one, but that's always mandated. That's a standard static code that has to be there if you're using argparse. So in theoretically, as I said, with open and with open, similar to it, argparse is more flexible. It has like few functionalities like say optional arguments, just like we have seen in function definition optional. So there is like command line arguments also, there are few optional arguments, and also it sends meaningful messages to the users who is trying to run it. Like say you pass this code to some other team, right? They're trying to run it, and we'll see what are the arguments again. So one, if they don't know what is the argument that they have to pass after driver.py, we could always give some help message so that they know what arguments they have to pass. They need not reach out to you, boss. I'm not able to call your program. It needs some arguments. I don't know what it is. They need not reach out to us. So once they try to run the program without arguments, it will pop up a message. You need to pass these arguments. These are default arguments or mandatory. These are optional arguments, and this is the argument type. We will learn everything, but that's one advantage of argparse. So why we need argparse? But also it makes sense for us to learn sys, because very quick or simple applications you might need to use sys. Like we do use sys sometimes, but majority of the code I've written, like few utilities we haven't used sys. It's like argparse is where we have used it. While we are working on a one of the application is the journey. It's a cloud. What we're trying to do is all SAP systems we're trying to automate everything. Like say automate everything as in okay, say suppose you're working on an you're working on SAP systems, right? It's on Linux. So the Linux will have patches, right? So kernel, heart of Linux, right? So kernel upgrade there, so it needs a kernel upgrade. So basically what manually anyone does is, so they go into the website and they go into the portal and see what is the latest kernel version, download the patch, and then copy it onto the Linux server and then execute a command, few commands to update the kernel. So what we try to achieve is we try to automate everything, as in, so whenever there is a file that is placed, the new patch has come, so we will tap into the API. We will see if the patch is there, new patch is released, or it's a downloadable is there. We'll get the version of it. We'll temporarily unzip it in one location. We will see the version of it, and then we will see the version of the system that we are using. If the version on the portal is higher, then we will proceed with the upgrade. If the version is the same or lower, basically it cannot be lower, it will be the same, right? Sometimes it could be lower, very rare cases, but if it's lower, we'll skip the upgrade. So this all we wanted to automate it. So instead of it, it's like without manual intervention, right? Touchless automation or touchless maintenance. So these are few things that we have done. So mostly those things, right? It always it was very complex, and we also wanted it to make it systematic way. We used argparse, and few requirements where we have developed utilities just to upload files, right? Like say user will have a small utility to just load the file from his her desktop, and it will be placed onto some remote location, remote server. So those things we have used sys directly. So the complex, it depends on up to the user, but there are multiple teams talking or using your program. Always it's advised to use argparse because it's flexible and also meaningful. That's with the intro on why do we have two modules and what is the importance. This is like the winner, right? Let's see how do we do it. Okay, so maybe I'll try to cover this arc sys. This will be quick only, might take like 15-20 minutes, and then we could take a leave. We will reconvene. So let's cover this topic. So as I was saying, what? So this is my first argument, right? And because what I said earlier, anything after Python is considered as an argument. But the thing what we were trying to do is we weren't reading it, right? Because I have to read it, just like I said, I didn't define it, I didn't read it. So that's how it's working. So now if I have to read it, so what do I do? Sys, as the module name is sys. Okay. So now I have imported sys module. So now I have to read what are the arguments that is there. This one is pretty much straightforward and simple. Like say something called x, and then sys dot argv of 0. So what it does is whatever is the first argument, it tries to read it. If I have second argument, sorry, it's argv, it's not argv. Just like you're trying to read a list, right? So 0 and 1. So let's comment this first, and now let's see. Let's print it. Always try to print it so that you'll understand what it is. First argument x. Hmm. We will come back to this again. I don't want to. I can use quit also, but let's see what happens. Okay. So what it did, it just gave me first argument driver.py. So what is the first argument I gave? Driver.py. Let's go back to my driver script. So what I did is I just quit the execution here instead of doing all this again, right? We already know what happens it is. I just don't want to waste time executing everything. So sys also has another method called exit. So what it does is it exits the execution with a return code. So what is my, what I passed one some value which is 0. RC is 0 is always a success. So we'll see what it is. So okay, I've given this. Where is it? It's not here. Did it give any RC? If you're executing anything in Linux or any system, you'll see RC0, RC1 as a return code. If somebody is sending a return code, you'll find it. But here we didn't find it because we're just passing it, but it's not being caught anywhere. We'll come back to it. That's one concept. A good concept, an important concept also. But right now, just consider it as I wanted to execute the terminate the flow here, terminate the execution here with a success code. It doesn't matter even if I won. One is like failure. So let's see if it's giving anything. No, it doesn't matter because as long as I'm not reading it or catching it anywhere, it's not going to give anything. Always good to give 0 as a success. I'm breaking the flow here. Instead of commenting all the lines, I'm just breaking the flow here. Okay. So now as we've learned, yeah, anything after Python is the first argument. This is the first argument. Let's say, what is my code here? Okay, this I've commented. I'm not catching any arguments here. So one advantage, disadvantage of this is, see, I gave something. It could be anything. See, it is still running because this guy doesn't consider anything. So if you're trying to read or use sys, if you're trying to read the first argument, even if the user is passing additional arguments, it's not going to fail. That is one disadvantage. A least kind of advantage, but it's majorly a disadvantage. It's not gonna give the user, right? Because if, see, as I was saying, right, multiple teams talk through, right? So like say some mainframe system or some other system is calling my program and they're passing it. So what is the output they get is first argument driver.py or some output, some standard output they're getting, but they don't know whether the arguments they're passing are being read or do they actually need to pass it or not. They don't even know it. It's always ending successfully, but still it doesn't make sense for them to pass it, right? So this is one of the disadvantages even if we give it. And let's go back to our program. Let's say now let's read it. But okay, I gave arg.v, right? Let's say, but let's not give that. Okay, let's try to run it. First we always have to learn what breaks my code. So now I didn't pass the second argument. So now it said, okay, it's list range out of index. It's like slicing, right? As I mentioned, it's slicing. So this kind of a list. So there is no second element. My first element is 0. My second element has the index 1. There is nothing here. Okay, which is meaningful. So now let's say I didn't do anything because I wasn't printing it. Print off second argument, comma y. Okay. Okay. So now this is the way you could read the multiple arguments. Even it could be anything. Like say, C, and also same. I said, right, it doesn't consider any the format of it or the data type of it, basically. So whatever the user passes, it always reads it as a string. It always reads it as a string. So that's why it's not making any sense to it. Even if I'm giving it in quotes or even if I'm giving int, it doesn't matter to it, at least to this sys. It always consider it as a string. So now let's take this to the next level, right? So I hope you guys are clear with this part. Using sys and what. So how should I make use of this guy? So I don't want, so I mentioned one point during this class. My driver is still partly hard coded, right? This is not fully hard code free. There is something hard coded. What is hard coded? This guy. At least this, let's leave it for now. Let's not complicate it. But at least this is hard coded. Right? Sample1.csv, because earlier I was giving sample space copy.csv and now I have to make it sample1.csv. So it's hard coded. So now let's get rid of this value also. Keep the backup at least for the time being. So now if I don't want this to be hard coded, what I can do? I could just give the first argument, right? Like say, let's make it file name just to be make it more meaningful. So now what we're trying to do, I'm reading the first, oh no, no, this is wrong. Let's get rid of this. This is not my zero, right? My zero would be what driver.py. So my second argument would be the file name, which I'm gonna pass while I call it. So my file name is here. I don't want this. So now, yeah, this is my return type, right? And file function. So this is my file name. And backup, let it be there, not a problem. Maybe for as your exercise you try to read it as the second value, you try to read. So what you could do as an assignment, right? Backup, make it read it from command line, or and you have to handle it, right? So what if backup is always optional, right? If user doesn't want backup, he's not gonna mention it in the command line. Handle all both scenarios. You could try it yourself. Okay. So now let's stick to this. So now I'm going to leave it as is because you're going to try it after this. So now file name. My file name is all fine, right? My second argument and then file name, I'm printing it. I'm just calling it. Like say, okay. So now what I can give, I can give the file name. See, this is my first argument. Alert file not found, cannot proceed to the next floor. Okay, that is fine because simple1.csv doesn't exist. Let us put it back. I don't want this. Sample one, sorry, not simple. Okay. First argument read, should have created a backup. It should have deleted my sample1.csv, and obviously it is letting the program go to the next flow, whatever it is. Let's see if everything is good. Sample1.csv is gone. Sample1.backup is gone. I mean, it's created. Everything else is good. So now what did we achieve? We achieved a lot here, right? So we even removed the file name which was hard coded in the driver script. My driver script is 80% generic, meaning not hard, it's dynamic, or not generic, dynamic, because it's not static is something which always happens, right? It is dynamic. It can read the file name from the command line argument. So one advantage of command line argument is this. So earlier, if we haven't learned sys, so what were we doing, or what I was doing? I always going into the driver.py, which is my main script that kicks off by the command line arguments, and then I was doing it. So now we made it all dynamic. See, we are reading everything from the command line argument, which is the best thing. Yeah, these are like very critical concepts, and also these come every day whenever we're programming in Python, right? It comes up every day. We have to understand, right? So that's why we are going a bottom, like from the last step to the top, right? Or sometimes you're going higher to lower also. So this is like lower to higher. How the requirements gets complicated or complex. So that's how it is. So we cannot just go with the requirement at the complex level. You need to split it into chunks which you could easily code and then start coding. You'll have the momentum, right? So suppose if a requirement sounded to you, right? If we are new to a project and if somebody gave me like, okay, you have to execute Python, you have to create a module which can be executed via command line interface, command line argument, and then the file name should be read by the command line argument. You have to make it all dynamic. You have to create a function library, blah blah blah, right? So as simple as that, what we did, we first created a file, manually try to read a file, and then we try to edit a file. We've seen with open, and I know, okay, with open is the best way to read a file. I would use with open, and right now it is deleting a file. So instead of deleting a file directly, what we did is we imported OS module, and then we saw whether validated whether the file actually exists or not. And then if it exists, we're deleting the file. And then we have advanced it to a functional library. We have created a function, we have created a driver script or a main script, and then we try to call it. And then again, the backup, we try to make it optional, right? And then again, what we did, the backup, instead of simply taking a backup with a hard coded value, we made it more generic, so that our code works for all kind of extensions and makes it meaningful, and it overrides anytime, right? So underscore backup, even if you want to make it more generic, you could always get the timestamp and append the timestamp to the file name, but it's not majorly required, unless, because backup is always what you don't want multiple backups of a file, right? Anywhere, you just want one backup of a file. So if you're trying to delete a file multiple times, it's always like, okay, some X version is already gone. So yesterday sample.csv had some content, and today sample.csv had some other content. So I don't want to keep the yesterday's content in it. I can just override it. It's going to override it, the underscore backup file. So I'm not creating piles of backup files which someone has to go in and manually delete it. So we're achieving everything there. So now what we achieved after the introducing the optional argument, taking backup and all, now we've even made our driver script more generic and accepting command line arguments. There are many phases, right, that we have achieved, and we have also covered all the concepts of it. These are like very critical and core. You name it, like fundamental, everything applies to these concepts. We have to understand it fully, so that we can excel much more. Yeah, that's one advantage of this, and that's how we do it. And we have seen, right? So one disadvantage of this sys is it always reads it as a string. You have to again typecast it, else even if you're giving additional arguments, it's not going to complain, it's not going to fail. And also all is like space operator. It's simple. Sometimes it is easy, as I said, right? Given examples. Complex, we always use argparse, and it's very simple, we use sys, so that it makes our coding easy. And also program, right? My driver script, it looks very simple here. So just I just, how many statements have we introduced? Just import and then the reading this, that's it. Rest all is fine, right? This is like informative, this we could get rid of it. All I've changed is the hard coded value to the file name. That's it. Very very easy, very simple, but less flexible in one way. And also we have seen how do you break the flow, right? If you want to break the flow fully, we'll see how do you read the exit code that we're passing, zero, which is a written code zero, RC code zero, people call it. It's a success failure. Zero is success, one is for failure. Anything other than zero is a failure. So if you're trying to execute few other, like say, if you're working on any bad scripts, right? Like Windows, if you're creating a bad script on Windows, if you're running it, so it will, a few of this lines of code will give you different error codes, 11504, 11505, minus 11306. It gives you different types of written codes. Everything is a failure Other than 0, everything is a failure. Yeah, that's with the sys. Maybe we can pause the session for today here. It's much more to absorb until now. Argparse, as I said, it requires standard lines of code, very static lines of code, and it has to be repeated by anybody whoever wants to use argparse. There is no other way to it. It's like 3 4 lines. You have to mandatorily type it within your program. You can read it. We'll see. That will be very interesting and meaningful also. We'll cover argparse in the next one. And also few on databases. I wanted to install some database on my machine so that I can walk through it. I'm working on it in the background so that we can save the time in the class, right? Me trying to install everything and then trying to connect or make Python talk to the database and all. I'm trying to do it in the offline background so that I could present it to you and we can save more time. So we'll cover more on databases also in the next sessions. There are many types of databases, right? Or the variations we'll say, but mostly you'll hear it as like what SQL, structured query language, and the other thing you'll hear it as NoSQL, as in NoSQL, as in it reads and saves data as documents, typically JSON format. I remember mentioning JSON, right? We will learn much of it in JSON while we're trying to connect to database or read data from a database, update a database, especially MongoDB. That's one of the DB we use widely. And cloud database, as you know, anything in the cloud, it's cloud, right? You don't need to worry about it. Scaling up and down and availability, everything is managed by the cloud systems. All you have to do is just connect to the database and play around with it. It's mostly on the cost, high cost end or low cost end, but any project can take their worries off of maintaining the system, right? So when we say a response time and availability, so everything will have a business severity priority, right? So as we have heard of multiple environments that are upright, production is always like has to be 100% available, right? Because there are millions of users hitting any production environment. It can't go down anytime. Even if it goes down by any chance, it has to be up in minutes. That's the response time, right? The That's a recovery time basically, or say resilience or any other term. But response time is also should be higher, right? If somebody is hitting clicking on any tab or trying to export data, or like say you went into your credit card statement, you want to download your statement, everything is dynamic, right? So it's not like your statement will be sitting somewhere, right? It's not like your statement is already generated in pf and ready to be just passed over from the database, right? It will, once you click on it, it will dynamically generate your statement just by the dynamic queries that they've put on, right? Like if you're trying to download your January statement, so the first to 30th, it will put the time query and then it will calculate everything. Everything runs in the background, and how much you have to pay, how much points have you got, the format like the header, logo, the footer, everything, and your address on top of it, your name, every detail will be like generated automatically. Once you click on it, then it will populate it into PDF and it will just send to your browser. You should be able to download it on your machine and you're reading it. Everything is dynamic, right? That's what makes it like the higher response time. So you don't want to wait, right? As an end user, if you're trying to download your statement, you don't want to wait like even a minute. You'd want it to be, all we do is click on download, all we wait for is the pop-up to come up, save as, right? If you don't say it, you'll get frustrated. Banks or any company cannot leave their end consumers frustrated. So it needs a higher response time, higher availability, everything is high. So mostly that's how people tend to use cloud database, so that they have their own systems, right? Companies need not worry about it because they have the SLAs, service level agreements, and everything to it, blah blah blah. That's all within the projects and companies, right? You'll get to learn once you move on to your projects. So these are like good to know things. We cannot blindly get into something, right? That's what happens in the background. Okay, just as a preface, so next class, yeah, we will cover in detail. So this is going to take some time, and this is very yeah, everything is important. Only thing is, when I'm trying to, don't think like I'm going to the ground zero and explaining it, because this concept you have to understand from ground zero. That's how you can think, right? Just like compiling within your, in the back of mind, you would think, okay, how would you do it? Just like the example I've shown, right? This guy, what were we doing? So as simple as splitting it, creating a file name, everything, we just did it in minutes. So it's the same thing, right? If you're dealing with data, it's always the similar kind of applications is what you do. If you're dealing with data, so that's how we do it. Mostly it will be on the strings, or most of the things data, like pandas, right? If you're reading a data frame, most of the generic type data type we use it string only. It makes our life easy sometimes, because few columns will have preceding zeros, right? Like your account number 001256. So if you read it as int, some of the times what happens is 00 would go away, 1256 will be there. If you read it as a string, it will save everything, the preceding zeros, or somebody needs a trailing zeros, like ending zeros. So those things, strings will make our life easy sometimes. So string, so we the earlier concepts like split, how we applied here, and then reading, slicing the string, slicing the list, basically the split string, which is a list, and doing it, and concatenation using a plus operator, easy because it's a string. Everything is easier once we learn it. So that's why I try to start again. Anything that comes up, I need to give the background so that you understand the importance of it, and also it goes in your mind. You can recollect easily. Yep. That's it for today. It's 8 o'clock, right? It's almost 1.5 hours. I think we should be good. We'll cover this part in the next session, and also we'll see, just to not get into it and make it interesting, I'll try to cover maybe SQLite, how I installed it and how do you have to install, and also some info on database. I give a lot of stories, right? So why do we need a database? Maybe you think through it before you come to the next class. Why do you actually need a database? So why not put it in some Excel or read through it or else work on it? So yeah, I'll give you the history, whatever I have learned from my years of experience. And I cannot cover the entire topics, right? But at least we will make you familiar with database, and also so that you could put up your resume. You can say, okay, yeah, have you worked on any database using Python? Yeah, you should be able to say, yes, I worked on various databases, and how did you connect to it, what is it, and how do you edit it, blah blah blah. We'll cover all the topics. Yeah, just like full stack, right? We'll cover everything else, which will be interesting. Yeah, it's not a derail from Python. We'll still be living within the Python, but we'll be learning much more concepts on database. Yep. uh Kola, that's it for today, Kola. I'm gonna stop sharing. Let's see. Okay, Kola, are you there? Not sure, but I think we can end the meeting. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe to KKR Gen AI Innovations channel.